You're watching and listening to the Electronic Intifada live stream. I'm Ali Abu Ni'ma here with my colleague Nora Barrows Friedman. And since the start of this genocide, Israel has killed at least 17,500 children in Gaza. That's an average of 30 children each day, more than one child every hour for more than 540 days. It's a staggering and horrific toll. And what makes it even more incomprehensible is that doctors report seeing children arriving every day in Gaza's overstretched and barely functional trauma centers with gunshot wounds. Their accounts, corroborated across hospitals and over time, suggest a disturbing pattern. This is not random, it is systematic, say the makers of a new episode of Fault Lines, the flagship documentary series from Al Jazeera English. The film, Kids Under Fire, investigates these atrocities through the stories of individual children and their families and testimonies from healthcare workers from the United States who witnessed them. You can watch the 25-minute film free online on the Al Jazeera website or on YouTube. Joining us now is Josh Rushing. He is the Emmy Award-winning senior correspondent for Fault Lines and one of the makers of this film. Josh, welcome to the Electronic Intifada live stream.
Thank you for having me. I'm
Josh.
kind of wordless at the guest that we just listened to. It's so hard to listen, and I don't even know what I can say. All you have to do is just listen to him, and it's like that's the whole story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you have told more stories from healthcare workers like Zahid, healthcare workers from the US who've been to Gaza and worked with many of the patients, just like Zahid Rahman, who we spoke to. Let's take a look at a brief excerpt from the film, and then we'll talk about it.
Children are easy targets, right? They are generally defenseless. It makes sense to target children if you're trying to target the future.
Fault Line spoke to 20 American doctors who volunteered in hospitals across Gaza since the war began. They all reported treating children with gunshots, often fatal.
It's not a rogue soldier that lost their ethics. It's widespread throughout the entire Gaza Strip. There's a definitive pattern of Israeli soldiers targeting quite specifically children.
I didn't want to believe that children were being shot. Nobody wants to think that other humans are capable of annihilating children in that way.
I had 18 cases of children with shots to the head. When you see one or two coming in that time that I was there, then I could say maybe it's an accident, it's crossfire. But when you see that a child is being shot in the head every day, multiple times, in the abdomen, in the chest, those are intentional. Someone is doing that.
According to the Gaza Ministry of Health, children make up over a third of the death toll in Gaza. Nearly 16,000 have been killed, mostly by bombing. Doctors say it's impossible to know how many were shot, since Gaza's healthcare system has been destroyed by the Israeli military.
Israeli forces have killed so many children in Gaza that it is most likely we will never know all of their names.
I have to say, Josh, that this film is extremely painful to watch. I watched it yesterday for the first time, and I'm still. I think that's why I'm still very much in a heightened emotional state. It confronts us with the full horror of what Israeli forces are doing to children through the testimonies of these doctors, some of whom we've just heard. During that clip, we blurred out some very graphic scenes because our video would probably be deleted from YouTube. That's happened to us in the past if we show them. But you chose to include the uncensored images of horrific injuries to children in the film. that would typically be edited out or obscured from a TV show. Tell us why you made that choice.
It wasn't a choice taken lightly. It was something we talked a lot about. Our videos have been age restricted on YouTube in the past, and when that happens, it throttles the viewership. I'll give you a real quick example. We did an episode about Assange, Julian Assange, when he was still in prison. As part of that episode, we showed the clip that that they released called Collateral Murder. And it's of an American helicopter in Iraq. They open fire on a group of men on a corner. It turns out two of those guys were Reuters journalists. We interviewed one of those journalists' brother, who now lives in Manchester. And we sat in his den and we watched the clip of his brother being killed. That entire video was on YouTube. It's over an hour long. We used 20 seconds or something like that in our piece, and within very specific context. And YouTube age restricted the video so that it became difficult for anyone to see the episode. So we blurred it. We blurred the entire thing, and they still age restricted it. To this day, that's age restricted, even though the original source of that video came from YouTube. So it makes no sense to us. And so we knew going into this that this would definitely face that, and that would hurt the viewership. We also had the question of the dignity of the children and of their families, and whether they should be shown or not. And we chose to defer to, we worked with a film crew in Gaza that we've worked with since this began, and we've made a number of episodes out of Gaza. These guys, I don't know how they do it. Our job is hard. Like I'm in LA today. It's perfect weather. It couldn't be easier, and our job is challenging. The fact that they can still do this, create this like cinematic video in Gaza and get it to us is mind-boggling, and yet they do. They do so that we can all see it. When we saw, we produced a version of the show that had everything blurred out, and the team that worked on it, we all looked at it and said, it changed the entire episode. It kind of lost its punch in a way that you should have to look at this. The doctors had to look at it. That's why they have that look in their eyes. It's because they had to see this. Everyone who lives in Gaza has to see this. A blur is a privilege. And so we deferred to our team in Gaza and asked them, particularly as you framed it, or as we framed it around the dignity of the victims and of their family. And they said, show it. And so we have chosen to show it. We have a warning at the beginning. But I think, I hope a lot of people would watch it, but if your dollars are going to this, I think you should have to watch it.
Yeah, it's the 1,000-yard stare that every one of those doctors that you spoke with has when recounting the children they treated, the injuries they saw, the patterns that they recognized. It's unbearable, and yet, as you said, it's our responsibility. Let's take a look at another clip right now.
If I was the only one who said, hey, I've seen children shot in the head, it's very easy to dismiss. If 40 other healthcare workers are saying the same thing, that's a body of evidence that's incontrovertible.
In Gaza, I saw the concept of innocence of children or protection of children was purposely destroyed with intent.
There will be some children that are broken and will forever be broken.
You're wiping out a certain number, you're maiming a certain number, and you're permanently, mentally, and emotionally disabling the rest, and that's going to be passed down to the next generation. So this is how you cripple a society.
They say that Gaza is the graveyard of human rights. And for me, it was really the graveyard of my belief in the human race being able to challenge its worst impulses. I don't know that I can ever get that back.
I think we can all relate to that. You know, we talk a lot with our friends and family and each other about how we've all been so irrevocably changed for the rest of our lives. You know, witnessing this genocide in some form or another. Josh, earlier in today's program, we spoke to Zahed Rahman, a critical care nurse who's currently in Gaza. Talk about the healthcare workers that you spoke to for this film when they came back from their medical missions. What are the patterns that they saw in terms of the injuries to children, and if you could talk about, you know, the impact that that has had on them?
Yeah, sure. One of the doctors you saw in that clip, Mark Perlmutter, who happens to be Jewish. He's been to Gaza. He just returned this week after, I think, his third trip now. He had also been at 9/11 on that day at Ground Zero in New York. And he was in Haiti on the first day or second day after the earthquake. He's been all over at these disasters. And he says that what he saw there in Gaza, all those others combined don't come close to what he saw. When you talk to doctors, it's like these are people who spend their entire lives compartmentalizing this kind of stuff. And yet you see what they saw in Gaza absolutely tears down the walls of that compartmentalization. It's haunting them. There's actually going to be a documentary coming out by Zateo about the doctors. I look forward to seeing that. I think they're going to do a great job with it. We made a conscious choice that we wanted to talk to the doctors, but we always wanted to center the children. That was the focus of our piece, the children and the families in Gaza. But it's impossible not to come away feeling the pain of the doctors as well. And the fact that they go back, you know, and these are really highly successful people who have highly successful practices, and they have families of their own, and they stop and they go back. And as terrible as Gaza, what's happening is there's something so incredible and profound about people who choose to do that. It's so beautiful, and to include your previous guests, so beautiful that they do that. I've been with Jazeera for 20 years now, and I was a Marine before that. I left over the war in Iraq, and then I was fortunate enough to get to help start Jazeera. And in 20 years, I think this is the most important work I've done, and it's all this work is. It's just bearing witness to people who have been there. And here's the thing: we don't need their testimony. Everyone sees this on their phone every day for 545 days. But to have someone from the outside add to that, particularly as an American, and it's important as an American because of the U.S. funding of it, to have Americans come. These are credible, educated, highly educated people who served in different hospitals at different times, who didn't know each other before, may not even know each other now, and yet they're saying the same things. It's a pattern. They finish each other's sentences, and it becomes an undeniable pattern. And it's like Tammy, one of the doctors there, she works in the ER in Chicago. She's seen plenty of young people shot. When she went over her first time, she said, maybe not the only time, I can't remember, she went again. She said that it took her an embarrassing long time to realize it was a pattern. Just as a human being, you want to think that it's crossfire. You want to think that it's a stray bullet, that it's collateral damage. But when you look around and there's no combatants, it's only children coming in. It's crossfire of what? There was no firefight. It's only children coming in so often. And they're coming in with headshots, chest shots, sometimes both, a head and a chest shot. That's not an accident. That can't be an accident. And the thing is, We put the question to the Israeli military, have any soldiers been held accountable or faced any kind of investigation or punitive action for killing children in Gaza? They chose not to answer, but we all know the answer. It's no. It's no, they didn't. And a child can never be intentionally targeted legally. It's a war crime. Period. It is a war crime. It's also something considered by the State Department, a very technical term, a gross human rights violation. And that term doesn't include war crimes. It has very specific definitions of what a gross human rights violation is. But killing a child intentionally, it's called an extrajudicial killing, an EJK. And these are technical terms. I'm using them really specifically here because they should trigger a legal process in the US under the Leahy law that anytime there's a unit that has been suspected, not even proven, but suspected of gross human violations, of which EJKs are gross human violations, then funding that unit should be cut off and investigation should happen. That's never happened with Israel. It's never happened. And it's not just in Gaza.
Yeah.
We interviewed the DCIP, the Defense of Children in Palestine, and they put out a report about how many children had been killed between October of 23 and July of 24 in the West Bank. And it was 141 children. Pretty sure I got that number right. I kind of need to go back and fact check it. 141. That's one every other day. In the West Bank, that's not Gaza. And what is the world saying or doing about that? And who has faced justice for that? It's done with impunity. The guy who helped who drafted the first edition of the Leahy Law, Tim Reeser, he was the senior advisor to Senator Patrick Leahy, says that the bill was written for exactly that. And had it ever been applied appropriately to Israel, maybe you don't have what's happening in Gaza happening now. But the fact that Israel gets away with it with impunity, and it's even beyond impunity, it's with reward. It's with more money and more bombs and more bullets. It is unjustifiable.
And in the film, you actually talk to a former lawmaker who signed off on an addendum. I can't even remember the exact language, but it was basically a loophole that was written to give Israel a pass around the Leahy law. And since, he's come to, regret his actions, but I mean, it's just, it's unconscionable. And it also, I mean, it just once again proves that the US has a vested interest in keeping this genocide going for ideological, political purposes, and that it has already granted itself immunity from from holding Israel accountable. It's just, it's shocking to see, and yet not surprising. It's, and then there was, there's the people who are treating the victims of these lawmakers. Dr. Mimi Syed, who we've had on the EI podcast a few times now, she, she was talking about in the film how she has, 2 children of her own, and she comes back and, in her one of her children's like first grade class, they have like a little ceremony for who's lost their tooth. And it's a very sweet and, very normal, sort of thing in a first grade classroom. And that she has this, this kind of psychic intrusion of remembering when she was in Gaza and she was holding the actual mandible of a child in her hands, with that child's teeth in her hands. I mean, what, from your perspective as a producer, as a host, as someone who's seen so much, what effect does this have, I think, on you, on media workers in general, let alone the people who are living with this? What have you come away with after making this film.
I'd love to talk about the State Department guy you brought up. I
Yeah.
think it'd be easy to villainize him, but he's actually a really interesting and intelligent, compassionate human being who I think is trying to reconcile what he was a part of. And I understand this because I came from a similar background. He's actually working with as a senior advisor now with Dawn, the organization that Khashoggi set up shortly before he was murdered. And he's working on this issue. And because of his background, I think he could do incredible things. I can relate to him because in thinking about this interview today, I was nervous about it because you guys cover this all the time. I cover a different story with every episode I do. What can I tell you about this? What could I bring to this? And I was reflecting on what brought me to Al Jazeera in the first place was this documentary film called Control Room. And it was about how Al Jazeera covered the invasion. And at that time, I was a Marine officer, a spokesperson, representing the U.S. during the invasion of Iraq. And the documentary is all about Al Jazeera, but I just happen to be this character in it that kind of goes through this transformation as I'm seeing. I think I'm a part of this like good guy coalition, and then I'm starting to see the war from a very different perspective when I'm over there. And I say something in it that is unbelievably naive. And it's about understanding the issue of Palestine. And how I didn't understand at that point, people were relating with the images they were seeing of the U.S. military going to Iraq with images they had seen in the Intifadas and in Palestine. And in my mind, they were two separate issues, but from the Arab world, they weren't. And I said something to the effect of, if I ever get out of the Marines, I hope to do something with this issue of Palestine. But I had no idea what I was talking about. And since then, it's been 20 years of education and trying to understand. Even today, like I'm still trying to understand what's going on in Palestine. And my whole worldview now is kind of about this and this issue. But at that time, when I said that, I was not uneducated. I went to the University of Texas. I had a degree in classics and ancient history. I worked in ancient Greek, the language, Koine Greek, Attic Greek, Homeric Greek. I translated Aristotle, Plato from the original text. I was educated, but I was in this bubble that felt like that everything told me that the U.S. was this benevolent force in the world. And getting out and looking back at that and seeing my naivete, I can relate to Charles Blaha, who's the State Department guy, that he was a defense attorney and he left that to join the State Department because he saw the diplomacy of the U.S. as being this kind of benevolent force. He spent over 3 decades there. And now that he's gotten out, he looks back at his last job where he had this, he helped develop this thing called the Israel Lehi Vetting Forum, which is basically a forum to apply the Lehi law to Israel. But what it really is it's made so complicated and Byzantine that it can never actually be applied. And he realizes he did that. He gave cover for the Lehi law never being applied. And he now realizes what the severe consequences of allowing a military like Israel's impunity. And he's dealing with that. He's trying to do something about it. And I admire that. And it's an interesting interview, I think, when you watch the piece. The interview is much longer than what's in the piece, but it's pretty arresting. With Mimi, Dr. Sayed, what an amazing person.
And actually, I apologize for interrupting you, Josh, but the last clip we want to show and have you speak about features Dr. Mimi Sayed, and get to that in a second. And I just want to also say regarding the former State Department lawyer you spoke about, that in previous episodes of Fault Lines that we've also discussed on this live stream, there have been former US officials who've kind of awoken to the reality, that they've come out of this bubble. So maybe it's not enough people and it's not early enough, but it's happening, and that's at least one thing to take away from this. But let's take a look now at this clip with Dr. Mimi and a young girl called Mira, and then we'll talk more about that.
Against all odds, Mira lived.
انت بنت قوية يا ميرا، صح؟ عشان هذا الوجع كله انت تحملتي وصرتي شاطرة وصرتي أحسن من أول إن شاء الله، صح؟ ماما. يا ماما.
فات وقفة بقى. لا.
How are you, doctor? How are you?
When Dr. Syed went back to Gaza in December, Mira was regaining her ability to walk.
Mira.
The last time I saw her, she wasn't even opening her eyes. She was basically just kind of laying there after she was extubated.
بتقولك إنه حطت مناكير.
Manicure.
على الفنجر.
Wow. She's talking normally, like.
ميرا
Yeah, all normal like before. So language is great. Standing, walking.
أنا ماسكة إيدها.
Yay, Mira! Oh, wow.
So just for those who are listening rather than watching, in that scene we saw the young girl, Mira, she's 4 years old, her head covered in bandages, her mom holding her and telling her, encouraging her about how well she's done, how well she's recovered. And of course, we saw Dr. Mimi Sayed with Mira and her mother. And as Nora mentioned, Dr. Sayed has spoken to the Electronic Intifada more than once about her experiences in Gaza, most recently just a month ago. Josh, tell us about Mira, what happened to her family, and what type of future she faces now.
Mira's an incredible story. Her story begins with from Dr. Syed's perspective when she's brought into the emergency room, and she has been triaged as Black, meaning can't be saved. But Mimi saw her like respond to pain and thought, I can save this girl, and or at least try. So she intubates her so that she can breathe, and the girl starts breathing, and then Mimi runs and gets a doctor that can actually like they do a CT scan, they see the bullet in the brain. There has to be an operation at that point. What had happened earlier that day was it was a fairly normal day. Mimi was in front of her father, and all of a sudden, Mira was in front of her father, and all of a sudden there's just blood running down her face, and her father runs and grabs her and takes off running. Neighbors told her and our team that it was a quadcopter that had fired, which kind of matches for where the bullet came in. It hits here. Mira was standing at the time, so it must have come from somewhere above. And you see it lodged in the back of her brain pointing down, meaning the trajectory came from somewhere above. Our team spent at least a month going down a rabbit hole trying to prove whether quadcopters were actively being used in this way in Gaza or not. There are tons of reports of it. It's widely accepted that they're used that way. But the couple issues are that there's not a single image, video, or still that we could find, and we really, really, really tried, of a quadcopter with a gun mounted on it in Gaza. A lot of people believe they've seen it. There's actually most of the stuff you'll see, and you even played a clip of it. It's quadcopters dropping explosives or incendiary devices, but not firing bullets. There is video of some quadcopters firing bullets, but that's promotional video from companies that actually have contracts with the Israeli military. So there's very good reason to believe the Israeli military has quadcopters with guns on them. We just can't, through either acoustic analysis or forensic analysis prove it that they're used in Gaza. One theory is that they're being used as spotters for snipers. And so because quadcopters are ever present, you hear them, and you don't really know where bullets are coming in from. You're associating the two, but it's actually from a gun position in some other place. But we really don't know. But we do know that witnesses reported that she was shot by a quadcopter. So Mimi basically saves her life after she's been triaged as unsavable. And when Mimi goes back for her second trip, she's able to reunite with the family and see Mira start to walk. She's actually a lovely update. She's walking on her own now. But what's terrible about this family is this was Mimi's second brush with death. That at one point they were fleeing, heading south, and they were hit by an Israeli missile that killed one of her aunts and took off the leg of another aunt. That was the first one, and it injured Mimi. That was her first time in the ER. Second time, she shot allegedly by a quadcopter in the brain, and somehow, even in a broken healthcare system, she's surviving that. She'll need multiple operations. She'll need like years of physical therapy. Yet she survived it. After Mimi's visit with her, that was in December that we filmed. The family was hit again while Mimi was at physical therapy. An Israeli bomb hit the building next door. Mira was hit again while Mira was at physical therapy. An Israeli bomb hit the building. Mira survives again, but her mom, who's featured in the film there, you see her standing, lost a leg. So now Mira faces a recovery with a mom who's also trying to recover from an amputated leg. And they want to leave Gaza to seek the medical treatment that they both need. But so far they have not been allowed to. They can't because someone else controls that, and that's Israel.
The story of Mira is so touching, and it's a story of incredible survival and hope amid so much suffering. And as you show, that it's like there's no guarantee of a happy ending. Mira had this miraculous survival from being shot in the head, and her father actually shows us the bullet that was extracted. And yet this family, like every family in Gaza, could be killed at any time, and all that struggle to survive could come to nothing. And yet there they are, and people have not given up hope. Josh, it's an extraordinary film. It's an extraordinarily difficult film to watch, but I agree with you. People should watch it. They should be aware that it's a very graphic film, but it is the reality, and we're grateful to you and your colleagues for bringing it to us. I want to remind people that the film is called Kids Under Fire. It's an episode of Fault Lines, the flagship documentary series from Al Jazeera, and you can watch it free online at Al Jazeera's website or on YouTube. And Josh Rushing reported the film. He's an Emmy Award-winning senior correspondent with Fault Lines at Al Jazeera. And Josh, we're very grateful to you for making time to talk to us today.
Thank you for having me. And while you do see me on air, and I reported it with a team. The director of the film, if you will, it was Amel Gutefedi, which I'm going to kill her name, but she was with Vice and won a bunch of awards for what she did on Wagner. Layla Larian, who's the executive producer of this, was with me every step of the way. Our producer, Adi, puts a master's touch to this like you've just never seen. Adi Hasbo is an amazing editor, and then the film work from the team in Gaza, and for the doctors to all participate. If anybody wants to watch this film with us, the team with me, we're going to screen it live in Washington, D.C. at Busboys and Poets on April 21st. Check Busboys' website it's going to be at the Brooklyn location, and check the website for the time. But thank you. Thank you for covering this, and thank you for having me.
Great.
Thank you for the work
so
that
much,
you do,
Josh.
Josh.